Welcome to the 2023-2024 NBA Deep Dive series, where we are going from every single team from worst to first, from lowest rated to highest rated. And at 25, we do have the San Antonio Spurs, who finished with the, I want to say, second worst record in the NBA last season. They were last in the Western Conference last season, but if you watch their games, they had a lot of quality losses, if that makes sense. There were a lot of games where they were competitive down to the wire in the fourth quarter. Greg Popovich did the masterful tank job. He would play a roster of like Trey Jones, Dominic Barlow, Blake Wesley, Malachi Branham, and like Julian Champagny. And then that was how the roster would lose their games, because they would just throw out a whole bunch of guys who are 20 and 19 years old, or G League guys who don't belong on an NBA court just yet. And he would develop these guys, and they would sit all their healthy players. Keldon Johnson played like 60 games, and Devin Vassell played 60 games, and they were still competing with winning basketball teams. It wasn't like they were doing this against the Rockets. They were doing this against the Nuggets, and they were doing this against the Suns and the Lakers. They were playing tough basketball wire to wire, but just would come up a little bit short because they didn't have a single superstar on their team. And they're a long ways away from having superstars on their team. But the groundwork is set. Number 1 overall pick, Victor Wembanyama, is here. And they are going to be coming in at 25th because of all those changes and the fact that institutionally they're one of the strongest teams in the NBA. But they did come in at 22-60 last year, like I said, last in the Western Conference, and that did benefit them with a rigged NBA lottery system, giving them the number 1 overall pick. And last year they were the last team in the NBA, and they probably did deserve the number 1 overall pick, but because of everything that they put together, they're still going to come in with that 78.32 rating, ahead of the Magic and ahead of especially the Rockets, who went on a bit of a winning streak last year, which is why in record-wise, they were tied, but they held the tiebreaker, so they're 14th in the Western Conference, while the Spurs fell to 15th. But let's go ahead and look at this offseason. Enough rambling about the San Antonio Spurs. And they're losing KBD, Gorgia Jang, and Romeo Langford. For Romeo Langford, all things being equal, no offense, good riddance. He's probably out of the NBA. He'll play in China somewhere. Gorgia Jang, he's had a good career. He's bounced around quite a bit. For whatever reason, when he comes to San Antonio, he plays a little bit better than he does in Atlanta, and he does in, I want to say Sacramento? Is that where he was? Gorgia Jang has been around the league for a long time. He's a decent shooter, big man, can't defend, not athletic. He's probably on his way out of the NBA as well. But Keita Bates-Diop had some career seasons with, surprisingly, the San Antonio Spurs. And it's kind of similar to how Trey Lyles is really succeeding and excelling in his role in Sacramento. He came over here. He was a decent 4, gave him great energy. His shot would fall a little higher than it has across his career. And he was just a really good role player, like a 12th man off the bench for this team, who eventually worked his way to being the 7th or the 8th man out of the rotation. I mean, he's got good size, nice wingspan, gave you a ton of effort. He would lock up bigger wings. He would lock up the centers for the other team. He improved that 3-point shot, but ultimately they are moving on in favor of the younger, more talented, higher upside guys. And I can't be upset about that, because some of their additions are going to be pretty strong. Like some guy from France who's 7'5" with an 8-foot wingspan and literally unstoppable, the highest rated prospect in the history of basketball since LeBron James. Like a Reggie Bullock, who's a career 38-ish% 3-point shooter. Now, some of the other additions they brought in, Chetty Osman and Campaign, kind of don't make sense unless these are their win now, bring in some veterans and give them some veteran experience moves. But none of these guys are really big, high IQ guys. They're just kind of fringe 9th, 10th man on the rotation guys who I don't know what they're going to be able to bring to this team. But let's start with the starting 5, going after Mr. Trey Jones, who is a former 2nd round pick out of Duke and who is undersized. And he has definitely improved year after year. Now, I am not sure if he's backup point guard potential on a championship team, let alone starting point guard potential on a championship team. Now, he's a good passer. He's got that 6.6 to 1.6 turnover ratio, roughly 4-1. Him and his brother, Tyus Jones, are just remarkable at not turning the ball over. They're just smart players. But he struggles to figure out when to pass and when to assert himself, because for whatever reason, in the G League, he's like this 40% 3-point shooter, aggressive, bullies other players. And then when he gets to the pros, his lack of size is an issue. His lack of shooting is an issue. That 28% from 3 is literally unacceptable. And if it wasn't for the fact that there wasn't a single NBA caliber point guard on this team for probably like 2 years since they got rid of DeJounte Murray, Trey Jones would be out of the NBA too. But he's put together a pretty solid career, and he's a good enough facilitator, runs this offense well enough. He's been in the system now for, I believe now, 3 seasons, and he's just really taken advantage of every single opportunity that he's had, because they cleared the decks trading away DeJounte Murray, getting a whole bunch of first-round picks, and they said, you know what, we're not going to take anybody. We're going to be bad on purpose, and we're going to let Trey Jones develop, and he's developed into a pretty nice NBA caliber point guard. Is he going to be on the roster long term? Unknown. Is this an upgradable position? Certainly. He is undersized, about 6 feet out of shoes, I want to say. Just another one of those guys who they're listed at 6'1", and he looks like he's 5'10", 180 pounds, but he's not a horrible defender. He's still exploitable. He's got a negative defensive rating, but it's not like James Harden in Houston bad. He averages 3.2 deflections per 36, which puts him in the 89th percentile. He does a decent job at being a pesky defender, I'll say. And with all the guys that have incredible size behind him and around him, the fact that he's a bad defender, but the only bad defender on this team in the starting lineup is certainly worth something. Moving on to Devin Vassell, the 80 overall. And he's one of the guys that, I don't know how to explain it, but Spurs fans love him. And I just don't. I appreciate what he is as a shooter and a scorer, and he's probably their most versatile offensive guy, but he never blows me away when he's on the court. He's been steadily improving year after year. Rookie season, 5 points a game on 34% shooting. Sophomore campaign, 12 points a game on 36% shooting from 3. And then last year, 18 points on 38% shooting from 3, which is, like I said, every year he's getting a little bit better. He's got really good size at 6'5" with a 6'10" wingspan, so he can play the 2, he can play the 3, he can dribble, he can create his own shot a little bit. He's kind of on the Mikal Bridges development track, except for he isn't a 4-year college guy. He is going to a season where he's going to be 23 years old, but at the same time, I just don't see the star power with him, and I go back and forth with Spurs fans on this a lot. He just doesn't seem to me like a guy that you're going to build your team around as a cornerstone franchise piece. Jeremy Sohan, I see it. Victor Wembanyama, I see it. Devin Vassell, I don't. I think he can be a quality role player, quality starter, two-way guy, but some people are comparing him to Kawhi Leonard, which just seems to me like a little bit of a stretch. I haven't seen that elite defensive ability that I've seen from even Jeremy Sohan on the same team that Devin Vassell has the capability of. He has the wingspan. He is the prototypical NBA size. He's a good three-point shooter. Theoretically, he has unlimited upside, but I haven't seen it game to game, minute to minute, where he's aggressive enough and assertive enough and elite enough and says, I'm the best damn player on the court. All that being said, he's a good player with that 38% shooting. As you can see, he's the only starter right now who is an elite shooter for this team, unless they have a guy like Reggie Bullock or Dougie McBuckets coming to space the floor. He needs to be starting regardless. Now, one thing I would like to see, and this is not related to any of the players, is I'd like to see them play Jeremy Sohan at the 1, kind of that 6'9" Magic Johnson point guard role. So I have a Jeremy Sohan at the 1, Devin Vassell at the 2, Keldon Johnson at the 3, Victor Wembanyama at the 4, and Zach Collins or another center, Charles Bassey at the 5, and just be this ridiculously long, ridiculously stout defense that nobody can score of. The second coming of the bad boy Pistons, getting locked up on the perimeter with Devin Vassell and getting locked up in the paint with Victor Wembanyama. I feel like that would be mean. Jeremy Sohan is good enough to be the point guard. The possible positional flexibility that this team has with Victor Wembanyama and Jeremy Sohan is near unlimited. Moving on to the next guy who is an 80 overall as well, in Keldon Johnson, statistically the highest rated scorer on this team, putting down 22 a night. Shooting has fallen off a little bit, 32.9%. He had that 1 year where he shot 40%. I think that was last year. Maybe it was 2 years ago. But just from his stroke and the fact that it was more of a flash in the pan thing than anything else, we all saw that he's just not that good. He's not that elite next level player. He's not probably going to be an all-star given his limited upside that he's only 6'5" as a power forward, given his lack of agility on the perimeter. But he's strong and he is relentless going to the basket. He's the pinnacle of what Najee Marshall could be when you just give him unlimited opportunity and you say, Keldon Johnson, go be you. He's going to drive hard on you every single possession, or he's going to put up a 3. He's a good enough defender that he's not going to be too much of a problem. And if you have Victor Wembanyama cleaning up his mistakes, then it's not going to be an issue at all. He's probably likely to be the one guy, the odd man out of this team, being a 6-man off the bench, a scorer, an electric energy bunny for the team, and bring in like a Zach Collins to be the center, while Victor Wembanyama slides down to the 4, his more natural, because he just doesn't have that size. But for now, this is the roster that I'm going with, having the best players on the court. I think Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, Victor Wembanyama are all no-brainers to have as their starters. Speaking of that man, Jeremy Sohan, and I talked so much shit on him during the draft process. I did not see Jeremy Sohan's game translate to the way that it has. Now let's just start with this, because he is a horrible shooter, 24% from the three-point line. Everybody saw his one-handed shot mechanics when he got to San Antonio because his regular shooting was so bad that Greg Popovich said, forget it, just take the other hand off the ball and shoot with one hand. And it worked a little bit. Now, if he wasn't a gym rat or he was just an average kid who put in the work, clocked in 9 to 5, but then went home after work, there's a good bet that he is a bust because his lack of shooting is unexceptionally bad. He is the worst shooter on this team. He's probably one of the bottom 5 shooters in the NBA right now. And look, shooting comes at a premium these days, despite of his positional versatility in his defense. If he never worked on that shot and just was like this for the rest of his career, we'd have a problem. But this guy works his tail off, accepts coaching from one of, if not the best basketball staff in the NBA. Everybody's seen his free throw. And the fact that he's willing to go through this, the fact that he'll go on TV and not give a fuck how his shot looks, as long as he's on the path to being a better shooter and a better free throw shooter, is something that you don't see in today's NBA. Somebody who's willing to be humble and accept the coaching, which is just a credit and a testament to this team's culture and a credit and testament to Jeremy Sohan's personality. He's right now basically a more athletic Scotty Barnes. His passing and playmaking is huge. His defense is locked down on the perimeter, and he just needs that jump shot to come in the offseason, either this season or next, and he can be lethal. He can be an all-star. He can be a superstar. His potential, given his athleticism and his size and his strength, and the fact that he's already an elite defender competing to be on one of those all-NBA defensive teams, man, if it happens, this won't be a traditional path to NBA excellence, but it is what it is. I'm happy to see that he's one of those guys, those perfect matches to the culture that he went to, the teams that he went to, where everything works out. Because if he went to a franchise like the Rockets, he would be probably a bust. But him, Victor Wembanyama, and the future of the San Antonio Spurs team looks bright. And Greg Popovich has made a lot of comparisons to Jeremy Sohan's game before Manu Ginobili. It's just a bright future with Jeremy, and I am nothing but excited to see him. More so, I think, personally, than Victor Wembanyama right now, just because Wemby is so young and everybody's expecting this. I did not see this from Jeremy Sohan game. Part of why he fell to 9th, but he's got to work on that jump shot, praying and hoping that it comes along in the next few seasons. And now let's go to that big man, Victor Wembanyama. Like I said, I have him slotted here at the 4. I've seen some other rosters where they have Zach Collins at the 5 and they move Keldon Johnson to the bench. I just don't think you can put your highest paid player coming off the bench unless their name is Russell Westbrook. But you never know. The Spurs are more than willing to mix and match, delineate rosters, and figure out which is going to help them win, which puts them in the best positions to succeed. Now, Victor Wembanyama, y'all already know the story. Ridiculously tall, plays like a point guard. Shot stroke is pure. Even though he only shot 27.5% from the three-point line, I think there's a few tweaks that they can do because his arc is a little too high on his shot because he is 7'5". He doesn't have to put that Derek Fisher 30 feet in the air jump shot arc, because when he goes up for the jump shot, he's already at like a 15 feet in the air release point. He could shoot a laser shot right at the rim like Kawhi Leonard, and it's probably going to be about as efficient as it needs to be. He puts almost too much arc. He puts too much touch on his shots, which is easily correctable. He is crazy. His defense is already elite. He's just so tall and so fluid. You saw in the Summer League games, he would swallow up any attackers that were coming at him. He affected so many shots. He blocks so many shots. He's already an instant candidate for being Defensive Player of the Year because of his blocking ability. That 8-foot wingspan means if you come within, I don't know, 8 feet of him when you're going and driving into the paint, he's going to block that shot. His issue, interestingly enough, is going to come on the offensive end, and he's going to struggle from short guys that are swiping the ball at him as he dribble drives, and that's just because he's so freakishly tall, and the NBA defenders are so aggressive. They are so elite at coming in, helping off from one pass away and doing that swipe. But Victor Wembanyama is a willing passer. He has a vision that you don't see from big guys, which is why we compare him to a LeBron James. He has the passing ability of a guard while being 7'5". His passing is elite and electric. It gets oohs and ahs from the crowd. And then when he doesn't pass, he can just dunk over about 99% of the NBA because there are no real 7-footers. Like Walker Kessler is a legit 7-footer. Who else, man? Boban Marjanovic. I just can't believe that this dude is so tall. He can yam it over anybody. He'll get the putbacks. His arms are so long. His wingspan is so long that he'll be grabbing offensive rebounds and punching balls up in the air that normally would just be an easy prototypical defensive rebound for the other team. and lead to another possession, or even more so, leave into him getting fouled. Because of his ridiculous wingspan, players just don't know how to play him. He got fouled so much excessively because they would try to contest his shot, which eventually would lead to an offensive foul because they wouldn't leave him any space around him. What is it called? The landing area, which is now new in today's NBA. Or when he would do that James Harden rip through is 8 feet long. So people are just going, oh, I'm going to try to poke at the ball here. Well, guess what? His arm is still a further 2 feet away and you're called for a defensive foul. He's going to get a lot of free throws just because of his freakish size. But there is always going to be some possible upside limitations. And for him, it is the shot, which I think is improvable. I think he's young. I think he's going to get a few tweaks and a few alterations from this incredible San Antonio Spurs staff. The strength, obviously going to be an issue. He's like 12 pounds. You see his arms and legs. Even if you say he's 300 pounds, he's still probably going to be undersized compared to a LeBron James. Strength will always be a weakness for him. And just touching a little bit more on the strength issue, I haven't seen that sort of dickhead mentality that I like from my big men in today's NBA. I even saw it with Chet Holmgren, who's got the same build as him, but he doesn't have that Q mentality. Guys are going to swipe at the ball, and he's got to be good enough and strong enough to say, I'm going to snatch this ball out of the air, I'm going to take it coast to coast, and I'm going to yam it on somebody's face. To me, it seems like Victor Wembanyama is too good and too nice, and he's not going to try to bully somebody, and he's not going to try to back somebody down. Look at the way who's a good comparison? Amen Thompson was playing in this summer league, where he just gets into you. He bodies you and he bullies you. He says he's the best damn player on the court, demands the ball, and does what he does best, which is play make. I didn't see too much of that FU mentality from Victor Wembanyama, but of course, he's like 19 years old, so that's probably not a big deal. Strength an issue. Holding on to the ball is going to be an issue because so many people are going to swipe at him, and then injuries, because we just don't know, and we don't see guys this size stay healthy for that long because he has all the same number of bones in his body as you and I do. He's just 2.5 to 3.5 to 4.5 feet taller than you and I are, because he is the tallest man in the NBA given this like guard skill set that he has. So he has the same number of bones in his feet. He has the same number of ligaments and the same number of muscles. They're just stretched out to such extreme proportions, and he's so skinny. And I worry every single time that he hits the floor because his shoulders are so narrow. Like, he hit the floor twice in the first game that he played in the summer league, and he already tweaked his elbow, and you could see him constantly touching it and flexing it because he just has no meat on his bones. He's got no body fat, limited body muscle, and anytime your limbs are being stretched out that far, there's just a lot of possible potential to getting hurt. So those are always going to be my worries, and I'm going to be knocking on wood every time I see Victor Wembanyama play because he's a literal walking mismatch. He's Shaquille O'Neal, the second coming, just in a different body, in a different skill set. So he's an instant, obviously one of the best prospects, if not the best prospect in the history of the NBA, and there's nothing but upside for him. Unfortunately, I can't agree with NBA 2K24 and give him an 84 rating because he just hasn't played a minute of NBA basketball yet, but he is coming in pretty high at that 79 overall. But let's go ahead and move on to the next 5 of this Spurs team, and I wasn't sure who to put here, so I'm putting some veterans and some old timers on the Spurs, starting with Mr. Cameron Payne, who I guess you could say he had a down season last year, but I feel like the whole team did. And it's not that Cam Payne doesn't know how to play the point guard position, because he's been solid. Now, that first year when he came back after being in basketball Siberia and Monty Williams said, we're going to give you a chance, and they went to the NBA Finals, Cam Payne was unreal. There were long stretches of basketball where either Cliff Paul would go out with injury or Cliff Paul would sit for a couple minutes a game, and Cam Payne would be better. He'd be faster, more electric, more elite. He would shoot 44% from the three-point line, which is unstoppable. Be a decent facilitator. His turnovers have always been an issue because he's not a natural point guard, but you stretch out his per 36 numbers. In that first incredible, possible, almost all-star year as a backup point guard, he was giving you 16.8 points, 7.2 assists to 2.0 turnovers, and that's more than acceptable for a guy who's going to be your point guard of the future. And then the Suns traded him away, and I'm not really sure why, because now they don't have a point guard. They have Bradley Beal playing the point guard, and then they're going to have, Devin Booker be at the 2, Kevin Durant at the 3, or the 4. I don't understand why, other than just to clear house, that the Suns got rid of Cam Payne, because he is proven to be a quality NBA point guard. And there's probably a point in this season where if Trey Jones is such a defensive liability, that Cam Payne will step in and be that dude for the team. Now, he does have more of a scorer's mentality than an assister's mentality, and last year was bad. His turnovers per 36 jumped up to 3.0 from that great year he had before at 2.0. His shot efficiency hasn't cratered, but he's not a 44% three-point shooter. As you can see, he's a 36.83% three-point shooter. And just last year across the board, he was a negative guy, minus the VORP being at 0.2. His offensive box plus minus was a negative 0.5. His defensive box plus minus, wow, words, can't say that, was a negative 0.7. He was just a minus player for the Suns last year because the whole team struggled. So I understand the Spurs trading for him. I understand their need for a point guard or a backup point guard, whatever role he's going to fill. I think campaign is going to exceed expectations because he's always been an easy guy to root for in the NBA. And I think Spurs fans are going to be pretty happy with that pickup. Somebody who they do love and who I'm struggling to fall in love with after the draft is Malachi Branham. And I don't know what happened, but ever since he got into the NBA, he lost his touch completely. Part of why he was taken in the first round, part of why he was so impressive at Ohio State is he was slithery, smooth, and a scorer. He shot 41% from three. It was only like 37 of 109, which is, I guess, not high volume, but at the same time, his shot was falling. His shot creation was good out of Ohio State. And man, I just don't know what happened, but he's what I call in the business an unimpressive scorer. As in, he'll score 25 points on you with mid-range jumpers, backdoor cuts, a couple spot up threes. He's not going to jump you out of the gym. He's not going to get flashy, dribble the ball behind his back, bully you. He'll just be quiet. He'll be efficient. And he'll score well. Now, I think he's got a little more upside than Blake Wesley does because he does have touch. I guess last year was rough for him. I hope he gets in the gym. I hope the shooting coaches for the Spurs help him continue to develop that jumper because 30% is unacceptable, especially when he shot 40% from college. That's a 10% drop once you get into the NBA. And that's why his VORP is so minus, is because his efficiency has cratered. But he was a rookie last year. Hopefully he steps it up. That gets that sophomore boost that some of these guys do for the Spurs. And maybe he can break the starting lineup. Maybe he'll step in, have Devin Vassell play the 2 or the 3, and then he'll play the 2 and move Keldon Johnson back so he can space the floor. I don't know. With all these young guys, there's a ton of versatility that this Spurs roster can have. Moving on to Mr. Cedi Osman, the Cleveland Cavaliers' favorite. And while I did like the Cameron Payne trade, they brought him in for basically nothing. They did the same with Cedi Osman, just another quiet, solid two-way player for the Cleveland Cavaliers because Cedi was on those teams with the Lakers, with LeBron James, and he just never got minutes until LeBron left, cleared the decks, and they were saying, all right, we need to go in the rebuild process. Cedi stuck around. He was a hard worker. He gives you effort. He's good enough from the three-point line, 37% last year. 8.7, 2, and 1.5 isn't bad splits for a guy who didn't see too many minutes, who's consistently been a fringe starter, and he's starting to hit his prime now. Gonna go into that year 28 season. That's kind of when NBA players get it all figured out. Their mental comes along with their physical, and Chedi's always just been a steady, moderately efficient 10, almost 15 points a night when he gets the minutes. Great energy, great teammate, and I think he's gonna fit perfectly with the Spurs team, either coming in to start because of injuries or just coming off the bench and being a positive player for this team. But there's not too much to say about him other than that. He's okay as a defender, not great. Not going to create his own shot, not going to get the other guys around him going. He's not a facilitator by any stretch of the imagination, but that 37% from three might be good enough to replace a guy like Dougie McBuckets if that shot isn't falling, because Dougie McBuckets is a one-note kind of player. He's going to come in and he's going to jack up threes off the screens, off the dribble. He's going to run around. He's going to do his best David Bertans impersonation, except he's going to shoot 41% from the three-point line and be a slightly better defender, if I can say that. Honestly, Dougie McBuckets was almost on his way out of the league as well. His defense was just so bad. I'm looking at his win shares. They're like 0. I'm looking at his defensive box plus minus. Last year it was minus 2.5. The year before, minus 2.4. The year before that, minus 2. Basically, he's going to lose you 2 games just on his defense alone. But because shooting is at a premium still in today's NBA, and because he's one of the few guys who does shoot above 40% for their career, Dougie McBuckets does have a roster spot. He's on the final year of his deal, so I would fully expect that he might be on the move to a contender at the halfway point of the season if things aren't coming along and clicking too well, because they brought in a couple guys who offer a little more versatility, who can shoot. Like I said, Cedi Osman, Reggie Bullock is a little better of a defender. Blake Wesley, if that 3 comes along. Julian Champagne was incredible in the final stretch of last year and this year's Summer League. So there's a little more shooting and a little more versatility to where Dougie McBuckets is not the only guy on this team who can shoot the three. So we'll see if he's sticking around on this roster any longer than half of a season. Moving on to Zach Collins, who's kind of a surprise and kind of why they were willing to say, you know what, we're going to trade away Jakob Poeltl for some decent draft capital, some decent return. I think they got 2 first-round picks out of it. Anyway, Zach Collins was, let's face it, incredible last year. He's a legit 6'9", 6'10", who can occasionally hit an outside shot. Last year, I think, was a career year from 37%. We haven't seen that since he was in the draft process. He lost a lot of post touches from the year before because they were kind of just saying, do whatever you want. We're going to see who's going to stick around on the roster. And he went from being okay, I'm going to back that guy down and try to be really brutal and really offensive. He went out, set screens, drew fouls, committed fouls, was just a little bit of that chaotic Dwight Howard late in his career energy for this team that we hadn't seen too often. And look, he was really good for them last year. He was the starter, and he might be the projected starter moving into next season just because he does offer that center position versatility that Victor Wembanyama doesn't have. He's a really strong guy who can put up with some of the other centers, not quite big enough to deal with the Nikola Jokic per se, but he can deal with the Alperen Şengün's, and he can deal with the Kevon Looney's who are going to try to out-rebound him because he's a solid-ish rebounder. 6.4 a game isn't great, isn't terrible. This is a team that rebounds together because there's the San Antonio Spurs. They do things the right way, but Zach Collins last year was nothing but impressive. And if he can stay healthy, which has always been the biggest asterisk when it comes to this man, he can be the starting center, start alongside Victor Wembanyama, space the floor, be the perfect match, the Robin to his Batman for this team, and move a Keldon Johnson to the bench, move Trey Jones to the bench, and officially assert himself as the #1 center option for this team. Moving on to the next of the 5, where we're going to start with, I guess, Devontae Graham. We can talk about him. He's what we call in the business a microwave scorer. It just feels like he's fallen so hard since those days in Charlotte where he was backing up LaMelo Ball. For him, I mean, if his 3 isn't falling, he's literally useless to your team. He's undersized. He's a negative defender. He doesn't facilitate. He can't play make for others, can't slash all that well, isn't a great athlete, doesn't have a mid-range game. It's literally 3 or bust for Devontae, who was just such a bright spot. I remember he was trying to be the point guard of the future for the Pelicans, and they just realized that he's more of a Patty Mills than anything else. So if he comes in, there's occasional games where he can drop 20 or 30 a night, and you go, wow, Devontae Graham is impressive. But game to game, minute to minute, he's not efficient enough. He's not strong enough to be a defender. He's not wily enough to be a playmaker. He's not tenacious enough to be a defender. He's just kind of a negative player that's going to bounce around the NBA and give you the occasional game that looks good on the stat sheet. I don't want to talk too much crap on him. I just don't want Devontae Graham on my team. If I'm a Spur, they're already over the limit on number of players they can have going into the season. Somebody's going to have to get cut or traded away. I think Devontae, I think Dougie McBuckets, and I would say probably Charles Bassey, if I'm being honest, are the guys that I want to leave off this team moving forward. But somebody who should be around for at least the long-term future is Mr. Blake Wesley. Now, Blake, he can't shoot to save his life. Oh my God. I was watching his new form or new look jumper that he's developed, and it's bad. He shoots with his arms, if that makes sense, which you don't see too often in today's NBA because everybody's working on shot mechanics, proper energy flow, transfer from the lower body to the upper body to the wrist to the flick. But he has this hitch where the energy stops when he goes from his legs. He dips, he shoots up, and then he holds it for a second, and then it's all arm, upper body energy, which is why his shot is so bad. The fact that he shot 38% from 3 last year is miraculous because he shoots 59% from the free throw line. It's not that he doesn't have touch, it's that he's heaving the ball at the hoop when he shoots, which is not good, and which is why I expect that 3-point percentage to drop and be more of a flash in the pan. He couldn't shoot at Notre Dame. He couldn't shoot in the summer league. He's probably not going to be able to shoot next season. But if there's one word to describe Blake Wesley, it is fearless, and it's why I loved him coming out of the draft. He's a really good athlete, and he's not lacking in confidence whatsoever. He's just lacking in skill and experience. A tick undersized at 6'4", and there was a great quote that basically materialized what Blake Wesley is to the Spurs, where it looks like he doesn't belong in the NCAA for a few games, and then he's going to ball out and look like a superstar for 3 games in a row. Basically, he's got the size, he's got the mindset. Now he just needs to put in his work because I love his X Factor mentality. He is just brutal. He will drive to the paint every second. He will drive and slash on you. He'll try to dunk on you. He'll try to catch you sleeping and off guard. He's got decent handle, decent vision, some of that point guard in case of emergency for this team who hadn't had a point guard last year. He was a facilitator behind Trey Jones. He will drive, and he will drive at you regardless of the result. He has only one mentality, and that is attack. But that broken shot is an issue, and it's what's going to be holding him back from getting legitimate minutes for this team. He has been proven and shown to be a tenacious on-ball defender, which is a good sign for guys like him who need to work their ass off to get minutes. If he can be like a Davion Mitchell sort of guard stopper for the point guard position or for the guard position in general, because there's no point guards anymore in today's NBA, he could certainly earn his way onto at least backup minutes, if not potentially taking over the starter role if he gets a little bit more efficient from the three-point line on a consistent basis and doesn't shoot 59% from the free throw line. Holy crap. But I love Blake Wesley's mentality. He's somebody that you want every player on the court to aspire to. With that FU, I'm going to attack, I'm going to attack, and I am going to attack mentality. Somebody who does not attack, though, is Reggie Bullock, who at this point, we pretty much know who he is in this career. He's a three-point shooter, not a great defender, really hasn't been a positive defender. Man, I want to say since his New York days. It's been, even before that, it's been a while since Reggie Bullock could lock you down. But he used to be a great defender. Now he's just a catch and shoot shooter. He's the definition of catch and shoot. If you so much as force him to take a dribble or pause or think about taking that jump shot, he's going to miss. He was part of the Dallas Mavericks disaster team last year who basically, if they get the ball and have to make a decision, they panic. They turn it over. He'll drive and make a bad pass. If he has to read the floor and read a defense, he's going to throw the ball away. And it's kind of why he was a minus player, an expendable player for the Dallas Mavericks last year, because if he's not shooting the ball well, he's almost useless to your team too. Similar to Devontae Graham, just a little bit taller, and he does occasionally offer some defense, although he is a minus defender. He's really been a minus defender since the Detroit days. Looking at the stats, his defensive box plus minus, the Lakers wasn't good. The Knicks wasn't good. He was good for one season. Dallas hasn't been good. Offensively, he doesn't do anything for your team. He's not a creator. He just spaces the floor. So I guess if Doug McDermott is gone, Reggie Bullock can be in here and give Victor Wembanyama some space to operate. That's really the peak and the pinnacle of what Reggie Bullock is going to offer you. Now, moving on to one of the Champagne twins. And oh my God, did this guy have a summer league. He and his twin brother have incredible size. They're like 6'8", 6'9", 250 pounds. They're kind of LeBron James-ish big, but he lit up the G League last year, and he lit up for the Spurs last year, which is why they signed him to that extreme contract. Now, I am only giving him a 74 overall because I can't give you grades for work done in 10 or 15 games in the NBA or the 3.5 games that you played in the summer league. He needs to prove it to me this season. But if he shoots 40% again from the three-point line, he's immediately overtaking Dougie McDermott and Reggie Bullock to be that 3-and-D floor spacing big wing player. He theoretically could overtake Keldon Johnson with the size and the strength. He could theoretically be a starter if he continues along this development track that I've seen from him, less so his twin brother, because he was dropping 30 in the night in the summer league, routinely going out and saying, I'm the best player on the court, and just splashing, pulling up, making plays, going off dribble, passing. Julian Champagne might be one of those undrafted gems that doesn't come around too often, because I don't know how the NBA missed him, but he went undrafted and he is a star in the making. He might have possible all-star potential, given how good I've seen him play in just the last half of the season, I want to say. So Julian Champagne, major name to work out for, but for now, he's going to be starting from the bottom. One of these guys like Dominic Barlow who's going to have to work his way up. Somebody who came over and kind of got a little bit more preferential treatment than I was expecting is Charles Bassey. Picked up, I want to say, in the second round by the Philadelphia 76ers to be their backup center, and he wasn't great. He doesn't stretch the floor at all. I know 37% from three looks good. It was really 3 of 8 shooting, but he's a really strong dude. He's about a solid 6'10", 6'9"-ish, I want to say, but he is strong and not bullyable at all. Now, he lacks elite skills offensively. He's not going to do too much for you. He will shoot the occasional three, as you can see, but he's not going to make it at a high, efficient rate. He doesn't have a lot of post versatility. He's not a great offensive rebounder, honestly, but he's a strong defensive rebounder and a kid who knows how to play the center position. He's been playing it for years. He was really good at Western Kentucky, a potential first-round pick who just fell out because of his lack of size and his lack of potential upside. At best, he's going to be, I don't know, who's a good comparison for Charles Bassey? Just a really big dude, like a Dwight Howard. I don't know. I can't really think of a good comparison for him. He's a little bit of a throwback to the old days of being a center, where he doesn't offer you anything offensively, but he attacks the glass relentlessly, and he's stronger than everybody else on the court, so he can back them down if he needs to. You stretch out his per 36 number. He's a 14 and 13 guy, which is, I mean, just classic big man numbers. And he was pretty good for the Spurs in the 35 or so games that he played last year. He's not so much a rim protector. I know his per 36 block rate is 2.3, but he doesn't have a lot of vertical athletic ability. He's just a smart guy who knows how to be in the right position, put his arms up, and make the defense have to score over him. And of course, if Victor Wembanyama is here, that is going to be a problem for anybody who's trying to drive in on the paint. But we'll move on to the next of the next guys, starting with, I put Khem Birch here. I know the next three guys are technically on the roster. You can only have 15 players in the roster with 3 two-way spots. Right now, they have 20 guys on the roster with 2 of them being two ways. So Khem Birch, I think, is likely going to be one of the guys who's not on the roster for the long-term future. He's an undersized 5, shorter than Charles Bassey, a little stronger than Charles Bassey, 30 years old, doesn't space the floor all that well, doesn't move on the perimeter all that well. Don't expect him to be around too much longer. Somebody who might make the roster, though, is Sandro Mamukelashvili, who everybody loves saying his name. It took me an offseason to figure this out, but he's one of those weird, interesting, young hybrid players. He played well in his rookie year. He played well in the summer league. He just hasn't got a lot of actual minutes, and he's a weird guy to game plan for. He's a tweener, big, really, really good passer for somebody who's about 6'9", but he's not going to be a center because he's only 6'9", and he's not a great athlete, and his shooting is horrible. That needs to come along quickly. But he's a young piece going to be 24 this upcoming season. He was on the Bucks, but they just didn't have space for him in the roster because he's a bad defender. He doesn't move his feet well. He's not big enough to be a 5, so that's kind of one of the problems when you pick up guys who are like 6'8", 6'7", but really strong, but can't move on the perimeter all that well. So like I said, decent passer, interesting piece, could be a part of the future. Somebody who is a part of the future is Mr. Sidy Cissoko, who I don't really know why he's an NBA player. I don't see it. He gets out of control a lot. He's got a really good build, though. He's strong. He's a decent athlete. A tick undersized at 6'5", kind of that Chumo Kiki, Keldon Johnson, ironically, undersized 4 build. He shot 30% from the 3 for the G League Ignite last year. He and Leonard Miller continuously got draft hype that I didn't really see, and I didn't see how their games translate to the next level. But he's a really good, really willing passer that you don't expect to see from guys who are kind of a power forward. He is a bad defender, though. He's got big, heavy, slow feet. But that passing and that dribbling and his handle gives him a little bit of that versatility to grab the rebound, dribble it to the other side, coast to coast, dump it off for the assist, kind of be a poor man's Scotty Barnes with that handle. He's pass first almost to a fault. Sometimes he'll overpass, but I think there is a little bit of talent there that they might be able to draft, maybe throw him in the two-way. I don't know how second-round picks work with that two-way contract moving forward. Next up is Dominic Barlow, another interesting piece. And if I'm being completely honest, I think he beats out Charles Bassey for a legitimate roster spot. He was really good at the end of last year, and in the summer league, man, he was electric. His jumper from the free throw line was knocked down. It was money. He gives you energy. He's young. He's a fan favorite. He's got a Hall of Fame name. Dominic Barlow is that Montrezl Harrell archetype of just a hardworking, undersized, energetic 5. He lacks polish, but man, does he try hard. He's got really good defensive discipline in no small part thanks to the great coaching and development track that Greg Popovich has put him on. But like I said, I think he's going to beat out Charles Bassey to be the backup center for this team. He's an energetic rebounder, and he's very opportunistic. Even though he's only 6'9", he's one of those guys who puts himself in the right positions at all times, finds a way to grab those 50-50 balls, finds a way to get those offensive rebounds, finds a way to box out the other guy and grab that defensive rebound. I know he got yammed on by Oscar Thompson and posterized, but man, I think Dominic Barlow has been really good and more than deserving of a contract. We'll have to see how the roster management goes for the San Antonio Spurs. And lastly is Sir Jabari Rice. Now, I get it. You look at the name. Let's just get the obvious. I don't know what to do with his name. Sir Jabari Rice. But he's a good passer. He's a decent athlete. I was actually really surprised by some of the game that he showed in the summer league. He's this super skinny, wiry build. He's got kind of a weird movement to him, a little herky-jerky. It's tough to get down. And he's a 5-year guy, so he's already 24 years old. But he's got a decent basketball IQ, might have some point guard developmental future. If there was no campaign on this roster, he might be the next best backup. Probably a little better of a true point guard than Blake Wesley is. You never know with these guys. but he helps way too hard on defense. He leaves shooters open. He's way too shot shy, and I think that's going to be holding him back from getting legitimate minutes. He's an older rookie, 24 years old, but man, he's got really, really pesky defensive hands. I don't know how to explain it other than he knows how to swipe the ball without fouling. He constantly is getting his hands on the ball. I think he could lead the league in deflections if you stretch those out to per 36 and you get a full season of Serge Rice's game under his belt. Just somebody to look out for. He is a two-way guy with a ton of talent on this team, so we'll see if they really do anything, but just a name to look out for. Moving on to the coach and culture ranking, where they're going to come in at tier 2. And I'm close. I'm so close to putting them up to tier 1. Greg Popovich, one of the best head coaches in the NBA, bona fide. You can see from the 5, 6, however many friggin' championships he's won, he is a true talent. R.C. Buford, proven to be one of the most intelligent men in the NBA. GM Brian Wright's done a fine job. The owner is bought in to San Antonio culture. But, and there's always a but with this, there is a little bit of a concern because of the way superstars are handled in today's NBA, because of the way that they have huge egos, and because of the way Kawhi Leonard forced his way out. And it's one thing to have one player do that, but he is a superstar, and he's one of the best players, at least talent-wise, in the history of the game. There's only a few Kawhi Leonards out there who could defend like he did, who could shoot like he did, and who carried a team to the championship the year after he was traded. I know injuries, and we'll deal with that when we get to that. But then they trade away DeJounte Murray. And DJ talks so much crap about the Spurs culture and talked endlessly and insulted the way that they handle their players. And I think it might be a little bit of the fact that Greg Popovich is older and out of touch. So I don't know how true or how false to take out these rumors. But you look at those guys, they're the last best 2 players on this team ever since the old guard had to retire, Kawhi Leonard and DeJounte Murray, and neither of them were happy in San Antonio. It's just something to look out for. Now you look at the development trains that they've brought along with Jeremy Sohan and Dominic Barlow and Trey Jones, and you can say there's no better development team than the one in San Antonio. So that's why they're going to come in at tier 2, not be a tier 1 team. This does put them ahead of teams like the Magic and like the Pistons. It's just something to look out for when they become superstars. They're not happy anymore in San Antonio, and that is a concern for me. But we're going to go ahead and check out this roster where there's a good amount of cap flexibility on this team. They have Keldon Johnson locked in 2026, and you look at that and you go, oh gosh, this guy might be coming off the bench in year 26, 27 season, and he's still going to be earning a lot of money. But they did a pretty good signing with him where they get one of those contracts that are going lower in volume and lower in value every single season. In the final year of his deal, he's only going to be getting $17 million a year, which feels a lot more just and a lot more fair than a guy who's earning $20 million or $22.5 million last season. So his contract is depreciating, and then Dougie McBucket's expiring deal. Victor Wembanyama, rookie deal. Devontae Graham, it's a little concerning that he's getting $12 million, but they might be able to move him. They might just cut him and waive him. They might deal with him being on the roster. But $12 million, that is a bad deal for 2 seasons, and we'll see what that does. We'll see if that hampers the future of this team. Trey Jones, starting point guard, $9.8 million. That'll work. Zach Collins is going to be up for a contract. If he stays healthy this year, I expect him to get somewhere, not quite Jakob Poeltl money, but a little lower, maybe $15 million a year, 10 to 15 after this. Devin Vassell, contract year. Jeremy Sohan, rookie. Malachi Branham, rookie. Julian Champagne, locked in for a really good rookie deal if he continues to develop his game. $3 million moving on to 2026 is going to be a steal of the future with his all-star potential. Blake Wesley, rookie. And then a whole bunch of vets who are on 1-year kind of prove-it deals. Kem Birch, Chetty Osman, Cam Payne, Sandro Mamukalishvili, and then Charles Bassey, rookie, and Sadie Sissoko they just drafted. So there's a lot of flexibility. The only bad contract I'm seeing is, well, Devontae Graham, and that's only for 2 seasons. Maybe they'll be able to move him at the trade deadline. But that is going to do it for this team, where they're going to come in with those 30.5 projected wins at that 78.32 rating. With this team, anything is possible because Victor Wembanyama is an immediate problem for every single team in the NBA. They're going to have to game plan around him. They're going to have to roster management around him. They're going to have to figure out guys that are going to be big enough, strong enough, fast enough to stop Victor Wembanyama. They're going to have to build a team around stopping Victor Wembanyama. So anything is possible right now for the San Antonio Spurs team, from making the play-in tournament to being a top 5 seed to tanking again and being a top 5 pick. Really, the future is variable and it's bright for the San Antonio Spurs team. But that is going to do it with the number 25 overall San Antonio Spurs. Let me know what your thoughts are. How are they going to do next season? What you agree with, what you disagree with, and I'll catch you in the next one.